So, now that we're winding things down, I wanted to do what I've always promised that I would, or at least said that I wanted to do, and get some of the Patreon exclusive videos out into the general population. It's not like I think they were ever being watched at all over on Patreon, at least I never had a single comment on any of them, but now that I've shut down my Patreon completely, I'm going to just be repurposing them, 10 at a time, into supercuts. I can't guarantee that they're all going to show up here, but I'm going to try, at least for the majority. These are all going to be in their original form as my patrons actually saw them. So let's get started. The religious love to claim that they know that God exists. But exactly how do they know that? I don't know, and neither do they. It's all fifis and faith, as we've all come to expect. Except, that's just stupid, and they don't care at all. So here we go again with 3 apologists, all of whom are utter morons. But, what else is new, right? So, I found this short compilation video of 3 different apologists and religious popularizers saying they know God exists. Yeah, get ready for disappointment if you think for 1 second that they've actually got anything worthwhile. This is why religion is such a ludicrous joke, and nobody ought to take any of this seriously at all. So, let's go get a chuckle and see why they're wrong.
Someone asked me at a university one day, can you prove God exists?
Of course you can't. Now, I have a feeling that he's going to prove just what an idiot he is in a second, but before we get there, let's look at the problem he faces. He's the one making an unjustified, unevidenced claim that there is a God. Therefore, backing that claim up rests 100% on his shoulders. Nobody has to prove his empty claim wrong. He's the one that has to prove it right. So, can he do it? Of course not. Therefore, the claim fails the rational sniff test, and anybody who believes it is an idiot. And that goes for any claims. It's why science works the way that it does. You don't accept things until you have substantial evidence to back it up. If you look back at the early days of Einstein, back when he first came up with the mathematics that suggested the existence of black holes, Einstein himself refused to believe that they were real because there was no corroboratory evidence. It just seemed so bizarre that even if the mathematics said they were there, he couldn't accept that they were there. It wasn't until we actually found black holes in the real world that he changed his mind. And the same goes for the Higgs boson. Tons and tons of mathematical evidence said that it had to exist, but we still spent millions and millions and millions of dollars proving it conclusively, because that's how rationality works. I don't expect Billy Graham is going to be rational here, do you? But let's see.
I cannot put God in a test tube. I cannot put God in a laboratory and say, here's God. I look up in the starry sky and I say there must be a God.
In other words, look at the trees. This is just stupid. It's an emotional reaction, not an intellectual one. It's just saying, well, I like it, so it has to be true. But that's just dumb. Because who says it's a God? I look up at the starry sky and I say there must be invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. How is that any better or worse than what he's saying? It's not. You can just make something up. There must be Filbert, the miraculous squirrel that did it all. How do you know it's your God? I mean, that's a nice claim and all, but how do you back it up? Why is it your God and not the God of the guy over there? Or why is it a God at all? Because without evidence, which he already said he couldn't provide, how do you get from, well, I think it's a god, to, I have any good reason to think that it is a god? That's where the religious go so wrong, because they don't actually care if it's a god, much less their god. It just makes them happy to believe it. Well, who the hell cares about your happiness? Your happiness doesn't affect the operation of factual reality. I can tell you where you can stuff your happiness, and I don't think you're going to like it.
I look at the beautiful nature round about me, and I say there must be a God. I see the birth of a baby. Gary Player was telling us yesterday how he saw the birth of his last child. And he said, as I watched that, I knew that there had to be a God.
That sounds like a personal problem to me. And, of course, that's really the thing here. It is a personal problem. Personal incredulity mixed with absurd wishful thinking, and all of a sudden, you've got a religion. If it convinces other people, other dumb people, other gullible people, then you've got something that's potentially dangerous, because religions, all religions, are mind poison. They stop a critical thinking mind from its proper operation. It just makes people dumb.
You know, I was flying in a plane the other day, beautiful sunset out the window, and I see God.
Really? And how do you know that exactly? Because I don't see God, I see nature. How do you know that's God? What the hell does God look like anyhow? Because this is about as close as you can get to pantheism, and I'm not impressed by that either. Well, look at the stuff. I'm going to call that stuff God. Why? Because I want to. But that doesn't actually mean anything, does it? It's like saying, I looked out the window and I saw Frank the Wonder Llama. Well, what does that even mean? Because there's no real difference between calling it God and calling it something you just made up in the moment. The reality is still there, even if you're not really in tune with it.
I say, oh, you're so dumb. No, you're dumb.
Yeah, I beg to differ with you. You people are imbeciles. And the fact that this is the best you can do, that all you can manage is to yell, well, I know you are, but what am I? Just proves it. Because we're pointing out what you're doing wrong, not that you actually care. Because you people are just a bunch of morons.
On one occasion, I had somebody just sort of walk right into it. You know, you one of these people who believes that God created the world in a week? Of course not. Did it in 6 days and took the last day off, brother.
It's really hard to overstate just how stupid these people are. Of course, they don't know anything, nor do they really pretend to. They don't know what the word even means. They just have blind faith. All religions do that. To the Muslims, they know that Allah is real. To the Hindus, they know that Krishna exists. And to the Christians, there is no question at all that God is real. Because every last one of them are complete morons. They don't actually care, and they don't comprehend the difference between faith and fact. To them, just really wanting something to be true, well, that makes it true. But that doesn't actually make it true. Of course, none of them care about the truth at all. It's all about emotional comfort and wishful thinking, and that's why these people are so laughable. And it doesn't matter if you're really famous, or if you're just some nutball on the street. You're all practical jokes. Is it any wonder that more and more people are just starting to laugh at them? I don't think so, and maybe you ought to start doing it too. Can we answer questions logically? Well, how many times exactly do we have to look at these ridiculous religious videos before they stop pretending that we can't? The only people who are logical and rational around here are the non-religious. Not that I think they're ever going to figure that out because, yeah, I don't have to say it, do I? So, this is a short from Jordan Jameson where, as is no surprise, he's going to make a complete laughingstock of himself. And that's pretty standard for the religious because they not only know nothing about the world beyond the walls of their churches, but they don't want to learn anything when we explain where they're going wrong. Why? Because they don't care. So, here we go with yet another example of just that.
Atheists cannot answer this question. We know time, space, and matter was all created at the Big Bang.
Well, we don't actually know that. It seems to fit the best evidence that we currently have, but we don't know any of that for absolutely certain, mostly because we don't know anything for absolutely certain. Absolute certainty isn't a valid criteria for anything. But sure, I guess we can go with that just for the sake of argument. So what? Now, I feel it's important to look at the weasel words that he's trying to shove in here, that things were created. No, things weren't created unless you can prove they were created. Things might have come to pass through entirely naturalistic means. But that isn't a creation, as I'm sure he's going to try to push into his assertions. This is why you have to examine every single word that they use, because they're just trying to smuggle their theology into everything. I don't even think they're aware of what they're doing most of the time, but we have to be, so we are. So knock it off, Jordan. You're not doing yourself or your side any favors, and you're not going to be able to slip that one by us.
But if it was all created at the Big Bang, what caused the Big Bang?
Who knows? And when I say that, I mean I don't know, and I mean you don't know. I know that you believe that you know, but that's faith, not fact. Fact requires evidence, and you simply don't have any. So far as we currently have evidence, we have no clue what might have started off the Big Bang, if anything did, and neither do you. And not knowing isn't a bad thing. We're just not there yet, and truth be told, we might never be there. And whether that makes you feel good or not, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. It's totally irrelevant whether you like the reality in which you live. You're still there. We just don't know. And your feelings don't mean a thing.
The cause would have to be something timeless, spaceless, and immaterial.
Oh, I get it. You've been listening to Frank Turek again, haven't you? How do you know any of that? Because here's the reality that we know. Our time and our space started at the moment of the Big Bang. But that doesn't mean that all time and all space did. We have lots of different ideas about what might exist beyond our universe, and those things may have their own time and their own space, making everything that you just said completely wrong. You are making assertions that you simply can't back up. We're right back to we don't know, and neither do you.
And the atheist would say, we don't know. So if you don't know, why could it not be God?
It could be. That doesn't mean that it is. This is where we're going to have problems. Just because you propose a solution that you just arbitrarily yanked out of your asshole, that doesn't mean that's the truth if you can't back it up with evidence. It could also be invisible, intangible universe creating pixies. We don't know. There is no better reason to think that it is the Christian God than that it is any other God, completely natural forces, or something we can't even begin to imagine. Just because you really like the idea of God that doesn't actually get you anywhere demonstrable. So, you really need to stop being an idiot.
And if there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all?
Geez, you people really need to come up with better lines, because absolutely nobody says that there could have been nothing. Well, nobody besides you. There is no nothing. There has never been a nothing, and there never will be a nothing. The Big Bang came from a state of intense heat and density. That is not nothing. But of course, you people are stupid. You are just embarrassing yourselves every single time that you let that sucker fly, because every single time you say that, you're proving just how little you actually know about anything. The only place there's actually nothing is in your heads, and that's pathetic. This is what happens when you spend all of your time paying attention to the religious circle jerk that you're spending your time in, and not actually talking to people who have a clue. You know, like scientists. Guess what, Jordan? Everybody is laughing at you. Knock it off. You know, I'm really sick of answering the same old tired crap over and over and over and over again. The problem is, even if Jordan saw my video, which is very doubtful because, you know, they don't tend to wander outside of their little safe spaces, but if he did, the next video that he put out would say the exact same thing, because these people don't learn anything. Honesty isn't part of their checklist. They just don't care. These are the same kinds of things that have been passed around in religious circles for a very, very long time, and no matter how many times they're corrected, it just comes back almost immediately. They think that this is some kind of massive gotcha, when in reality, it just proves what a bunch of imbeciles they are. There is no reason whatsoever that they ought to be this ignorant. In fact, if they were paying any attention of any kind whatsoever, they wouldn't be. But since the only book that they ever read is the Bible, I guess that's no surprise. Can you please just stop? If you want anybody to take you seriously at all, and I don't know why I'm trying to help you here, but I am, you have to do a whole lot better than you do. I don't really think that you're capable, but it sure isn't us who is incapable of evaluating things logically. Maybe you ought to just look in the mirror. Hey, want to answer a quick question? I do, even though I know up front it's just not going to be worth our time. But hey, I've got a couple minutes, and apparently so do you. So here we go with one more theist question for atheists, and it becomes a teaching moment, proving once again what a bunch of idiots they are. Today, we're in for a really short video, again by Jordan Jameson, the same guy as in the last exclusive, and I'm only doing it because this is a very common problem that the religious tend to have. And when I say religious, I don't just mean Christians, I mean theists everywhere. Every single one of them out there tends to have this problem. They seem to have an allergic reaction to not knowing things right here and right now. They'd rather just make stuff up to keep them happy, which I think describes every single religious video we've ever done. So, let's take a look.
I have a question for the atheists. If there is no God, where did the laws of nature and the laws of logic come from?
I don't know, and neither do you. See, here's the thing. The religious have just turned God into an answer for everything. It doesn't matter what it is, if they don't have a different answer immediately at hand, it becomes God. God did it. What made the lights go out? God. What made me sick? God. There is no question that you might possibly have that can't be answered by God. Unfortunately, if you're that stupid, it can also be answered by any other idea that you just make up in your head, which is why you have so many other religions all doing the exact same thing. Some people don't use God. They use Allah. Some people use Krishna. Some people use the flying spaghetti monster. Hopefully not seriously on that last one, but you get what I'm saying. They are so allergic to admitting that they don't know that they're emotionally comforted by any random idea that happens to appeal to them, and that's just stupid. But then again, look at who we're talking about.
We know man discovered them, but where did they come from?
Still don't know, and you still don't either. The reality is there are lots of things that we just don't know. We might have ideas, we might have concepts, we might have things that we think we might figure out, but that doesn't mean that those ideas are necessarily true. That's why we have to rely on evidence, not our feelings. And if you don't have evidence, you're really doing rationality all wrong. Now, I probably am not going to do any more of these stupid Jordan Jameson videos because the two that we've looked at so far have just been absurdly stupid in the extreme. And really, I've had people accuse me of purposely picking dumb videos to go after, but I think we all know that isn't true. It doesn't matter what believer or apologist we look at, they're all saying basically the same things. Some might be more eloquent than others, some might use bigger words, or have a manner that sounds, to the uneducated, more intellectual, but at the very base, they're all saying stupid stuff with no evidence whatsoever because fifis. Whether you're talking about idiots like Daniel King or idiots like William Lane Craig, they're all doing the exact same thing, and the only people who take any of them seriously are the people who desperately want to believe. And before I go, this is one really good example of why I'm just not a fan of TikTok or YouTube Shorts. This video is what, 10 seconds long? Maybe 15? I don't know. Something like that. What kind of rational thought can you get across in 10 or 15 seconds, or even a minute? Nothing at all. And that's why I really try not to engage very often with this extreme short form content, or in this case, minuscule form content, because it doesn't actually mean anything. If you can make a worthwhile point in a couple of minutes, great. I'll go take a look. It's probably why there's such a huge religious presence on TikTok, because they've got nothing intelligent to say, and they aren't looking for anybody who's going to examine it critically regardless. It's an emotionally comforting soundbite, nothing more, and that kind of thing shouldn't appeal to adults. Which is why the demographics for this kind of short-form video, they tend to run very, very young. They are for people with no clue and no interest in learning. They just want to be happy. And as we all know, that's just sad. Should we give Jesus our time? Well, since there's no good reason to think that Jesus ever existed, much less exists today, I really don't see the point, but here's a clueless boob who thinks we ought to do that. So, let's go take a look. We've all seen it before, some mindless moron making emotional appeals about religious subjects. Just give your life to Christ. And if you dare to ask them why, their eyes kind of glass over because they don't have a clue. They don't know anything at all. They've never even thought about it. They just believe. So let's watch one of those today and see just how dumb it all is, because it always is dumb.
Jesus can die a death like this for you. You can give him the next 60 seconds, so stop scrolling and listen to what I have to say, because this is important.
Then maybe Jesus ought to be the one making this video, because what you're really asking is for me to give you 60 seconds. You're the one looking for attention here, not Jesus. You're the one who wants hits, not Jesus. You're the one who wants subscriptions. You're the one who wants the YouTube algorithm to like you. Jesus doesn't actually get anything at all out of this, at least not directly. So let's at least try for some honesty here. I think that would be a good start.
Easter is not about the Easter Bunny. It's not about decorating eggs or dressing up nice and taking family photos after church. Easter is about Jesus.
Well, we might be out of the season at the moment, but you're not actually correct. Easter is based on the pre-Christian English goddess Istra, at least as best as we can tell, and it was only co-opted by Christianity later, by the First Council of Nicaea. It's a fertility festival at the height of spring, which is where we get the egg symbolism and the Easter bunny, all of that kind of stuff. All things that predate Christianity by a fair bit. Some of these things have been co-opted by Christianity, but none of them actually originated with Christianity. Pagans have been celebrating the spring equinox forever, and that's what Easter is based around. Most Christians are completely ignorant of this, just as they're ignorant of the fact that Jesus wasn't supposedly born around Christmas. That was yet another stolen holiday meant to appeal to the pagans that the early Christians were desperately trying to convert.
The Bible says that the wages of our sin is death. So that means that when we sin and rebel against God, even if we're doing our best, this is the punishment that we deserve.
But who cares what the Bible says? I know believers really want to believe it, but that doesn't really mean anything. Honestly, this is where I think so many Christians fall down in their reasoning, and I'm going to go into more detail on that in another video coming up eventually, because, I am thinking that far ahead, but here's kind of an overview. This is another instance where worldviews just get in the way of rational thinking. I'll hear them saying, as a Christian, and then they'll go off into some pro-Christian rhetoric as though Christianity by its very nature requires you to blindly accept certain things without any kind of critical evaluation. And that's mostly because that's exactly what it does require, but that's really pretty stupid. Just saying, as a Christian, that doesn't excuse you from having to reach a reasonable, rational, evidence-based conclusion. You don't just get to say, because I believe it, it's true. Any more than saying, as a comic book fan, the existence of New York City proves that Spider-Man is real. No, Spider-Man or God or Jesus or whatever, they only exist if they exist, and your preconceived faith-based notions mean absolutely nothing. Don't be a dumbass.
But God is also merciful, and he loved us so much that he didn't want us to have to pay this punishment for our own sin. So he sent his only son, Jesus, to come to the earth to live a perfect life that we should have lived, and to die the brutal death that we should have died in our place so that we could go free.
Well, that's your story, but it is only a story. That doesn't mean that it's actually so, no matter how strongly you believe it. It makes as much sense to say, as a Potterhead, everything that it says in the Harry Potter books is absolutely true, and we all have to be terrified of he who shall not be named. This just becomes shorthand for the cult because they all share common beliefs that they all really want to think are true, but they don't have to justify it to each other because none of them are asking any difficult questions. The problem here is that they tend to forget that when they reach out to people beyond their cult, that those who are not soaked in the absurd God jizz, they aren't going to respect those religious conventions. You know, don't ask questions. So we are going to ask a lot of questions, and they are not going to have any answers, and they're just going to look like a bunch of idiots because that's what they are. Then they'll get mad because they're expecting one reception and they're getting something completely different. And I'm sorry, but we're not being mean, we're being realistic. This is what everyone should have been telling you all along. You believe stupid things for nonsensical reasons, and you spend virtually all of your time in a religious echo chamber. Maybe you ought to spend a little bit more time on the outside, out here in the real world, where you would learn that you can't act like such a doe-eyed dumbass.
Some of you watching this have been believing the lie that your past disqualifies you from receiving this gift of salvation, when in reality, your past is the thing that makes you qualified to receive it.
Why would you want it? Because let's be honest, if there is a God, and it's anything remotely close to what the Christians have described, then that God did you dirty in the first place. God created absolutely everything, knowing full well how it would all turn out in the end, and even though he could have done it another way, he purposely chose to make everything the way that he did, knowing that he'd be sending most people to hell. What a dick. Then he decided that the best way to fix this gross oversight on his part was to sacrifice himself to himself in some kind of bizarre blood offering for reasons, I guess. And now, thousands of years later, you want us to bow down and kiss the ass of your completely incompetent deity. No, just no. That's dumb, but they're just too stupid to figure that out, and they don't want to listen to reason when we tell them how absurd it all is.
You know you need to be saved, pray out loud and confess your sins to Jesus. Ask him to be the Lord and Savior of your life, and tell me in the comments if you prayed that prayer.
Yeah, I didn't, and nobody should. This whole thing is just idiotic. Of course, that's what happens when, instead of just following along blindly and acting on pure emotions, you actually understand what's really going on. That's why they don't want to talk to anybody with a brain. I mean, really, look at that face. Do you see even a glimmer of intelligence behind those eyes? These are stupid people who are used to being led around like sheep. They're like the morons at airports handing out flowers. You know, like this.
Excuse me, we'd like you to have this flower. Excuse me, sir, would you...
Donation to the Reverend Moon. Juice for Jesus. Oh!
Read about Jehovah's Witness. How about Buddhism?
Help Jerry's kids.
Oh, yeah.
Scientology.
Or nuclear power.
This is the level of IQ that we're talking about here. Kinda sad, isn't it? The religious are really dumb. We know that already. Unfortunately for them, they spend a considerable amount of time proving it to, well, just about everybody who will listen. We're going to take a quick look at another instance of that because as much as I wish I could say it never gets old, it really kind of does. It's still important to recognize that this is what's going on, so, away we go. So we're going to go do a quick session with Mike Winger today where he's going to try to shift the burden of proof and pretend that absolutely everything that ever goes wrong in discussions between atheists and theists, well, it all has to be our fault. Of course, we've seen this kind of thing before, and we understand why it's happening, but it doesn't hurt to watch a theist make a complete jackass of themselves once again, just because it's kind of fun to look at. So anyway, Mike, you're an ass. Take it away.
Forgive me, skeptics who are watching, I'm just trying to be honest here.
That would be nice. I think we've seen enough of Mike Winger by now to know that honesty isn't really something that he knows how to do. Now, he's not the worst that we've ever seen, but I'd say he's probably in the bottom third, so you're going to have to forgive me if I question his honesty and his motives up front. But yeah, sure, Mike, go right ahead and say whatever you're going to say. I'm just going to tear it all apart anyhow because it's certain to be stupid.
I find that generally speaking, atheist arguments against Christianity are usually very poor.
Well, sure, because you have a vested interest in Christianity. It's how you make your money, after all. You have a financial investment in keeping the rubes in line. Plus, this video is being made for those rubes, so you have to say that, and they're not going to fork over their cash if you don't. But here's the real problem that you have. All of your objections to these stupid, supposed atheist arguments, they're all based on your own blind faith. You believe all of the things that you believe because it makes you feel good, not because you can demonstrate that any of it is true. So when you say that you find these arguments poor, that's like a flat earther saying they aren't convinced by images of the planet from space. It's because they're a dumb shit just like you are. You have no interest in demonstrable factual reality, which is the only metric worth going by. Therefore, what you think means absolutely nothing until you can come up to our standards. Give it a try.
They're not well thought out, they're not well defended, they're not well explained, and they do tend to focus more on giving an impression that something's wrong with Christianity and then moving quickly to other arguments, but not actually camping out and saying, I'm going to defend this thoroughly.
I don't even know what the hell that means. If I had to guess, and I'm just spitballing here because this is just ridiculous, I'd say he's just confused. A lot of theists tend to think that everybody is just like they are, but they're wrong. We are not making any positive claims here. We are pointing out the problem with the positive claims that they are making, the ones that they are responsible for backing up. Mike just isn't that bright. He doesn't comprehend the actual nature of the discussion at hand. And that's pretty common across virtually all religions. But what else is new? That sounds distinctly like a them problem, doesn't it?
And it's kind of like good answers to tough questions don't matter to some people. They just want to keep trying to give you gotcha questions.
So you're just watching your own videos or the videos of people on your side because we watch Christians going hard with the clear gotcha questions all the time. I've never seen an atheist with a gotcha question, although that could be in the interpretation. Christians just assume that their beliefs are correct without ever trying to independently verify them with evidence. Atheism doesn't do that because we've got actual evidence for the things that we say, or at least we ought to. I can only really speak for myself. And we don't have to rely on our fee-fees. This is a problem in outlook, not in content. You people are just doing it all wrong.
You bring up a challenge to Christianity, and when it's answered, you just bring up another challenge. You don't actually process the info and adjust your thinking based upon the reasons that have been brought.
That's a lie. I mean, at least in my case, I do address the claims made by the religious, but that's the problem. They're all just claims. They are based on the blind faith in the Bible and the teachings of their religion, not on demonstrable evidence that can be presented and independently evaluated by anybody who cares to look at it. Because that's what we're looking for, and you people don't have any, at least not that you've been able to articulate. When we ask, all you can present are just so stories and wishful thinking and the Bible says so crap that doesn't impress anybody with a brain. So long as everything that you have to say requires faith, you're not going to get anywhere because you are fundamentally on the wrong side of reality. And that's not our problem, that's yours. Figure it out.
Those are some of my concerns.
Yeah, but your concerns are just wrong. If you want my advice, and you didn't ask, but I'm going to provide it anyhow, here's how you need to proceed. I know you won't, but if you want to have a productive discussion with atheists, here's what you really have to do. Flush all of your feelings from your belief system and operate only on demonstrable facts. When we ask you how you know a thing, saying, because it makes me feel all warm and gooey inside, that doesn't mean anything. Your feelings just don't matter. We're all supposed to be talking about the fundamental nature of reality, and reality is demonstrable whether you like it or not. Unfortunately, you seem to think that your side gets to follow a special set of rules that you get to define on your own, and everybody else has to just kiss your ass and respect whatever emotionally laden drivel that you choose to spit forth, and that's not how this works. And that's also why you don't really want to talk to us. You're happy to talk about us, you'll make videos making claims about us, but you won't just come out of your religious safe space and have an honest, open, evidence-based discussion where you have to back up your claims with demonstrable facts, mostly because you know that you can't do that. It's why you come up with all kinds of excuses and bald rationalizations for why you're not required to follow the only working standards that we actually know are objectively worthwhile. Then you run around with the goalposts and shift the burden of proof because you know that the blind believers on your side won't notice just how irrational you're being. Because you don't care. You're an idiot, Mike. That's just the reality. Either play the game by the rules or stop playing at all. Anything else is just making a complete fool of yourself, and your numbers are dwindling because just about everyone can see all of the shit that you're full of. Knock it off. You're only making yourself a laughingstock. Now, I don't really care because that's really what you are, and you're giving me content to go after, but in reality, you're only doing damage to yourself. Don't you just love it when the religious claim, well, you can't argue against this, or you can't deny that, and we just look at them and say, oh yes we can. I don't know if they're just ignorant, stupid, or delusional, maybe all three, but we have good reasons for why we don't take your claim seriously. So let's go watch some of that. So, before we get going, this guy thinks that atheists can't watch this video, and we're just going to prove him wrong. I mean, seriously, he titled it Proof of God in all caps because I guess somehow that makes it more impressive. And then atheists can't watch with some bizarre random capitalizations because I guess young people are imbeciles. I mean, if you know how to follow proper grammar rules, don't take that to heart, but there's an awful lot of people out there right now who simply don't understand how to use the language at a third grade level. Please don't be one of them. Thus, let's see if we can get through this and prove him wrong, or if this is just another theist with no brain.
Atheists, if you want to continue to be blind to reality, you're going to have to close your eyes at the end of this video, because I'm about to show you living proof of God.
We hear that a lot though, right? It's usually spouted by people who have absolutely no clue what proof or evidence or anything but blind faith means, and I suspect we're going to get some more of that. So I'm game. Let's see your living proof for God, keeping in mind that I'm going to point out exactly where you go wrong and where you're completely incoherent. Won't that be fun?
Last October, there was a guy in the hospital of whom the doctors were talking about in past tense.
Now, I know I'm jumping in here in the middle of a sentence. He's talking really fast, and it's hard to find a place where he shuts up long enough to get a word in edgewise, so forgive me for that, but citation needed. This is how virtually all of these claims go. Unnamed people, unknown locations, doctors said something, supposedly. Now, we'll get to that in a second. What doctors? What are their names? Where do we go if we want to check out your story? No clue, because this is all just made up for effect. I'm not going to believe your make-believe story unless you can show me in the medical literature where it's been written up in peer-reviewed medical journals. You got any of that? Yeah, I didn't think so.
Even calling their pastor, and the nurse said he didn't write a last will, did he? The back of his skull was cracked after he'd been in an accident with a major traumatic brain injury.
And lots of people survived that. Hell, I have a friend who came off his motorcycle when he was going about 80, and he spent 6 months in intensive care with the doctor saying he wasn't going to make it. Today, he's fine, at least as fine as you can expect to be after something like that. He's got road rash over most of his body, he's missing fingers and toes, and he's had traumatic brain injuries, and they had to keep drilling into his head to relieve the swelling, but he's still kicking and he's still doing fine. It's been years since the accident. The body has an amazing ability to survive if you give it half a chance. If you're listening, Rich, which I know you're not, but hi anyhow, because this guy's story is just complete bullshit.
He was only breathing once every 60 seconds. He had no hope. Till about 2 or 3 weeks in, he finally woke up. Everyone had been praying in the name of Jesus Christ, and he completely recovered.
Yeah, I don't believe you. No independent corroboration that any of this actually happened. It's just a just so story meant to confirm the religious beliefs of those who already believe. This isn't evidence. This is the delusion of the religious who just want to tell you feel-good tales that confirm their already existing biases. This does absolutely nothing for skeptics. It just makes us roll our eyes. Maybe that's what he meant when he said we'd have to close them. Maybe by the time he gets to the end, we'll have rolled our eyes completely into the back of our heads. Let's see.
His name is me. Nice to meet you.
Prove it. Where are your medical records? Let's see you try to back any of this up. Because here's the thing. Even if he did have an accident, which, let me tell you, that picture is nothing compared to my friend back when he had his catastrophic skid across the pavement. But even if he did, you cannot draw a direct correlation between people praying for you, assuming that anybody did, and your recovery. This is the problem that most of these people have. They're just looking for feel-good anecdotes, not defensible, evidence-based corroboration. Because if you actually look at studies, and they have lots of studies on this, prayer works at a rate no different than random chance. That's the way this is. That's really where all these stories fall apart. Well, I don't get it, therefore God. But that doesn't mean anything. You are asserting a thing without proving that thing ever took place. You people are just morons. You really are.
During the coma, I was with Jesus, and he showed me some things about how to get answered prayer that will change your life. Click the comments in the pinned comment for that full video on YouTube, where you'll understand.
Prove prove it. Now, he says we can click on his pinned comment, but I don't believe any of this garbage without direct demonstrable evidence, and neither should you. Neither should anybody. You had brain damage, and now you think you were with Jesus. Yeah, it's a little suspect, don't you think? Because we can look at similar cases from people in other religions, and they think that they saw their gods too. Does that mean that they did? Because if they didn't, why should we take what you're spewing seriously? Thereafter, he tries to send us to a full video on YouTube, and this thing just ends literally in the middle of a word. What an incompetent imbecile. Maybe he really does have brain damage, I don't know. I'm just really wondering where the part where atheists have to close their eyes bit went. Was that weak-ass hospital picture supposed to do it? Because I was not impressed. I've seen some shit that'll make your hair go white. Arms and legs torn off in accidents. Hell, I saw a guy get plastered by a semi at about 60 and go flying. You know, ragdoll physics in video games? Yeah, it actually does look like that. So, what was supposed to make me stop watching? Or are you just an idiot? You tell me. None of that stuff bothers me at all. What does bother me is the abject stupidity of the religious. But because you really want to think that you, in your supposedly brain-damaged, concussed state, something that is known to cause delusions and hallucinations, saw Jesus in your head, I'm sorry, but you're just not selling it. Not to anybody that has a clue about modern medical science and what the human body is actually capable of. You're going to have to do a whole lot better than that. Understand what actual evidence is. This kind of thing is just laughable. Stop making a fool of yourself. It can only help. Do you love Jesus? I mean, I know I don't any more than I love Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker. Tons of people might like what Jesus supposedly said, but they don't love Jesus as an individual, nor should they. That just bugs a lot of Christians, though, and they have to make up a reason to explain it all. So let's look at some of that. The religious really love to make excuses, don't they? Today, we're going to take a look at a fragment of a sermon by Voddie Baucham explaining why people don't like Jesus. Well, there's no reason to think that Jesus was real at all, at least not the Jesus that was described in the Bible, so what difference does it make? So anyway, without further ado, let's get to it.
Listen, if Jesus is just a good man and a good teacher, even a good prophet, he is completely acceptable.
I don't think so. The Bible still records him saying a bunch of really stupid shit. Not too long ago, somebody told me to go read the Sermon on the Mount. And I think it was that Choose Jesus lunatic. I don't really remember at this point. But the thing is, I have. And it says a bunch of stupid crap that nobody should listen to. Especially, taking no care for tomorrow. I mean, it says, look at the birds and the flowers and God takes care of them, so he should take care of you. What, you've never seen dead birds and dead flowers? God does absolutely nothing of the sort. The only thing taking no care for tomorrow does is it makes you starve and die if other people, not gods, don't come along and take care of you. It's utterly irresponsible. I don't think Jesus is all that hot, man, God or not. So, speak for yourself.
Mormons and Muslims alike love Jesus.
That doesn't really say anything good about them, does it? I mean, Hitler loved Jesus, and that's not a particularly high recommendation. Personally, I think Jesus was kind of a dick, just like his supposed father. Good thing the Jesus of the Bible isn't real then, right?
Hindus and Buddhists are very happy with Jesus as long as he's just a teacher who offers sage wisdom. Then Jesus is fine.
Except he wasn't. Oh, I know you're personally attached to the things that Jesus supposedly said, but that doesn't really mean anything, does it? We can look at everything he said and ask, if he was such a well-respected teacher, why didn't he say some really obvious things? You know, don't own people as property. Things like that. Truth be told, Jesus wasn't anything special. He wasn't saying anything that those around him at the time weren't saying too, other than the whole "I'm God" part, which that's what got him into trouble. If he hadn't done that, he'd probably have been fine. It was his delusion, or the delusion of the people around him who just made up the story, that was the problem. It's what supposedly got him hung up on a tree after all. That's kind of a miscalculation, don't you think?
But the minute you step across that line and argue that Jesus is more than prophet, more than teacher, that he is actually God incarnate, God with us. Now, all of a sudden, those who were more than willing to gather with you scatter.
Because it's a bullshit claim. Once you go from, he was a guy that said some stuff you happen to like, to, he's somebody that everybody has to like, or you're all going to get smacked with the God stick otherwise. The only reason you can't see that is because Jesus is your guy. But let's turn it around. What if, for the sake of argument, we did that with, I don't know, Gandhi? He said a bunch of stuff that a bunch of people happen to like. Fine. Now, what if it had been announced that he was the son of Krishna? Now, instead of it being stuff you just happen to like, it's stuff you have to listen to and believe, because if you don't, you're gonna fry for all eternity in Naraka. That would change things, wouldn't it? Especially if there are a bunch of fanatics running around trying to enforce the things that Gandhi said on society, or at the very least their own interpretations thereof. This is especially true when you're talking about people who have their own ideas and interpretations and things like that about gods, as Vodi clearly has. Announcing, "You're all wrong about everything," that's not going to make you a lot of friends, at least not if you can't prove it. It might make you popular among the delusional, but that's not something to be proud of. So this kind of thing isn't impressive to anybody with a brain. It's bizarre to me that these apologists can't step out of their own blind faith for just a second and see why it wouldn't impress them if somebody else tried the exact same thing with a different figure and a different god. Because I guess they're just not that bright, right? The religious can never come up with any testable evidence for the things that they believe are true. It's always running around with the goalposts, and today's video is no exception. It's why they don't want to talk to us, because they're terrified of us. Maybe it's because they should be. J. Warner Wallace asks an important question. Can we test the truth of Christianity? Then he just goes and messes it all up by making empty assertions and not proposing any kind of actual testing mechanism that we can independently pursue. Because he doesn't care. He just wants people to throw money in his coffers. So let's go watch him fail miserably.
I mean, the resurrection is said to be by Paul, the most important claim of all evidential claims in Scripture. If resurrection isn't true, number one, you have no hope just from a Christian perspective of your own resurrection. But more importantly, if you're a skeptic, well, then you would know if the resurrection is not true that these guys are lying to you.
Way to talk fast there, pal. So let's backtrack a little bit. The claim of the resurrection is essential to the belief of Christianity. That doesn't mean that it's actually true in objective reality. This is the problem that we see so often from the religious. They really want the conclusion to be true, so they go along with the claims along the way, so they get to the emotionally comforting end point that they really wished was so. But that doesn't make it so. This has been going on forever, across all religions, across a lot of human history. It doesn't matter what it says in your big book of multiple choice. It matters, as he says in the title of his video, if we can test the truth of the proposition. So you actually have to have a test that you can put it to. So let's look at what that word means. A test is a procedure intended to establish the quality, performance, or reliability of something, especially before it's taken into widespread use. Now, do we think that the religious can propose such a procedure, especially given what it's supposed to establish? Yeah, I don't either.
Paul says we are all false witnesses if this isn't true. So for me, that's here's the great thing about it.
We're still waiting for your test. Just because somebody said a thing in a book that you happen to like, that doesn't actually mean anything. Faith isn't a reliable path to objective, demonstrable truth, and that's what we're trying to get at. Otherwise, you're not talking about truth. You're talking about wishful thinking. And I'm willing to bet he's going to get to the end of the video and still not have proposed anything that can be objectively demonstrated without having to take it on faith first. But that's not a test. That's a guess. That's just wishing it was true. Too bad these people don't know what these words mean.
Yeah, if you think about it, most ancient texts that are based in a theistic worldview, like, for example, the writings of Baha'u'llah and the Baha'i faith, make no claims, no dependent claims related to history.
Actually, they do. Look at Islam, for instance. It makes lots of claims that should be testable, if they were actually true, yet they aren't remotely. You know, just like Christianity. If you want to go even more recent, even stupid stuff like Scientology makes claims that ought to have demonstrable evidence available for them. The existence of Xenu or body thetans, for instance. Yet in the examination, they fail miserably. Just like Jesus.
These are a series of Baha'u'llah's wise sayings. But the Gospels are different. They include wisdom statements from Jesus, but they're embedded in a narrative that the writers want us to believe actually happened.
So what? I mean, you're already making assumptions about the wisdom of Jesus, most of which is ludicrously nonsensical on its face. Take no care for tomorrow and garbage like that. Even if you wrap that around stories circulated by word of mouth for decades before it was ever written down, that doesn't mean that any of it happened. Or at least, it doesn't mean that it happened as reported, because there's no way to go back and independently verify that it did. And as such, it doesn't work out for the religious. And that's why they have to rely on faith. And faith doesn't get you anywhere.
In a certain sequence, at a certain time in history, in a certain geographic location.
Then you should have no problem showing that any of it actually happened independently from your big book of mythological claims, right? Get on that. Now, I don't care if you can say, these other things can't be proven either. So what? Big deal. You're the one making these claims. You're the one that has to back them up. Other people who are making other claims, they have the burden of proof for their own. You have to show that this is real. Go ahead. If you can't, then I don't have to take you seriously any more than I have to take the other unjustified claims seriously when other people make them. I go by the evidence. I don't pay any attention to the claims. You've got a lot of work to do, so you better get to it.
Those kinds of historically rooted claims are testable.
Really? Please produce a means for doing exactly that. Something that isn't rooted in faith and wishful thinking. We'll wait. This is the problem. They might be convinced emotionally that they're right, but I don't care about your emotional comfort. I care about your actual evidence, the things that you can bring to the table that are going to convince me, as a non-believer, as someone who has no faith, that you know what you're talking about. The Bible isn't evidence. The Bible is the source of the claims. You have to come up with something independent of the Bible that shows that the claims of the Bible are actually true. And good luck on that. You're going to need it. This is why they're not making these videos for the skeptics, because the skeptics would point out all of the problems with their methodology. They don't really have a methodology besides, you just gotta believe. They rely on people who are already convinced on faith that it's true, because those people aren't going to ask any of the hard questions that really need to be asked. They just want to believe, and belief in and of itself isn't anything worthwhile. So the answer to his question, can we test the truth of Christianity, is no. No, we can't. Not in any way that he would permit. This whole thing is just a con. That's all J. Warner Wallace is doing, conning people. It's why he, along with just about every apologist out there, is such a ridiculous joke. They don't have the slightest clue what they're doing, nor do they care. The religious love to say that their arguments destroy atheism, but in reality, they never ever do. Religion continues to tumble off a cliff unabated, and atheism is the fastest growing quasi-religious position worldwide. So much for being destroyed, right? So let's see another case. Usually, these Patreon exclusive videos, they are pretty short, taking on videos that are in the 1 to 2 minute range, just as a way to say thank you. This time though, we're going to look at one that's really, really short, just about 20 seconds long. In fact, it says that it destroys atheism in 20 seconds. Yeah, that's not what it looks like from where I'm sitting. Let's take a deep dive into it and see why.
Okay, let me ask Professor Krauss a question. Why is incest wrong?
Whoa. Why is your background music so loud? You have to yell over it to be heard. That's the mark of a piss poor video maker. So anyhow, I'm going to answer that question, and I figure most people aren't going to like the answer. It's not wrong. Not if you're talking about objective moral values. In nature, it is insanely common. Incest is a thing. In fact, in selective breeding, it is often necessary to breed back to parents or siblings to lock in specific genetic traits. It's done all the time. So wrong isn't the right word to use in this case. You can probably get away with culturally or socially unacceptable, but that is entirely subjective. And I know a lot of people who don't like that, but too bad. So before we get back to the video, let's talk about incest, specifically in the Bible, because that's where this is all going after all. And there's plenty of it in there. You can look back to Genesis 9:20 through 27, where Ham saw Noah being naked and wound up being ejected from the family. In fact, in the Talmud, it suggested that Ham may have sodomized Noah. Of course, we know that none of this ever happened. It's just a story that the Hebrews stole from the Hindus. Lot's daughters tried to rape him following the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19:32 through 35. Abraham admits that his wife Sarah is his half-sister, the daughter of his father, but not his mother. We also see some extended incest, like where Abraham's brother Nahor married his niece Micah, who was the daughter of his other brother Haran. It's incredibly easy to find people marrying aunts and uncles, half-brothers and half-sisters in the Bible, and there's apparently no problem with that. God certainly didn't do anything of consequence as a result. There's an awful lot of rape in there too, but let's not pretend otherwise.
It's not clear to me that it's wrong.
Okay.
There's an
And Lawrence Krauss is correct. It's not wrong. It's just subjectively unacceptable in most cultures. You know, just like pedophilia. But don't tell the Muslims that. Now, sure, there are reasons that it's probably not a good idea, but for people back in the day, they knew absolutely nothing at all about genetics, and that's why it's so common in the Bible. But since this is a Muslim video, let's look at the Quran as well. There are places where Allah actively sanctions incest. Funny how Muslims don't complain about that one, right? Surah 25:54 actually says that Allah establishes relationships of lineage and marriage. One of the most esteemed scholars in Islam, Ibn al-Arabi, who lived between 1165 and 1240 CE, says of that verse, lineage is an expression referring to the mixture of fluids between a male and a female from a religious legal point of view. However, if this union between male and female occurs through disobedience or fornication, then the resulting child is not considered a part of a person's true lineage. That's why a daughter born from adultery is not mentioned in Allah's saying, "Prohibited to you for marriage are your mothers and daughters." Surah 4:23, because she is not considered a daughter according to the most authentic teaching of our Islamic scholars and the most authentic teaching of our religion. If there is no legal lineage, then there is no legal relationship, for adultery does not prohibit from marriage the daughter of the mother you committed adultery with, nor the mother of the woman you committed adultery with. What is lawfully prohibited is also not prohibited due to sin. Allah has bestowed lineage and relation through marriage upon his servants and greatly esteemed these relationships. Allah has also established laws identifying what is legal and what is prohibited, which are not equal to each other. Therefore, falsehood cannot be a part of these laws. Therefore, according to Islam, so long as you redefine incest as something else, well, you can just get away with it anytime you want. Your daughter, brought about by adultery, well, she's not really your daughter, so, you can marry her. Funny how, when you examine religion, you often find just how ridiculous these things are. And I don't think it's at all unusual because, you know, it's religion, and religion is based on hypocrisy. But honestly, we can't really be surprised by any of that, can we? Do the religious know that their religions are true? Of course not. That's ludicrous. But a lot of them, they really like to think that they do, mostly because I don't think they understand what any of these words mean. Nor, of course, do they care. So let's get to it. Sean McDowell wants to explain how he knows that Christianity is true. Not believes, not has faith, knows. And he's not going to do a good job, not just because this is a minute-long video, but because he doesn't actually know what these words actually are. And that's kind of a problem, wouldn't you say? So let's take a few minutes to go through it and see once again that Sean is an idiot and that Christians wouldn't know knowledge if it bit them in the ass. So, away we go.
How can I say that I know Christianity is true?
That's a good question. Now, it depends on how you're using the word knowledge. Let's go take a look at some of the options. So I'm just going to go with what Merriam-Webster says just because it's the first dictionary that came up on a Google search. It doesn't really matter. They're all about the same. They give 4 definitions with several caveats, but only the first 2 are in common usage, so we're just going to get through the first 2 quickly. Number 1, the fact or condition of knowing something with familiarity gained through experience or association. And this is probably as close as he's going to get to what he means. However, experience and association necessitate that you have something that you can actually examine, and the religious, whether they like it or not, they don't have any of that. So let's move on to number 2. The sum of what is known, the body of truth, information, and principles acquired by humankind. Now, that's a much larger picture, but essentially it is the same thing. It just specifies truth, not belief, and it also specifies that which is known to mankind, not to an individual. So this can't be referring to your truth or my truth or whatever those stupid things are, the nonsense that the weak-willed and the weak-minded want to throw around. There is only the truth. The facts, something that is true for absolutely everyone and inherently discoverable by absolutely everyone if they're willing to go and take a look. So let's see what else Sean has to say.
Well, first off, don't confuse knowing something with certainty. Knowledge is typically understood as justified true belief.
Agreed. Again, you have to have the truth, not a truth, not your truth, the truth. The thing that is actually so in objective reality that you can demonstrate. Not what makes you feel good, not what strokes your ego, but the truth. It must also be justifiable. That doesn't mean just what you can rationalize to yourself. You have to be able to justify it to others. So this is where I figure he's going to run into some trouble. But I really want to believe it. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. The only question that we need to have is this factually correct in the common reality that we all share? And that necessitates being able to show that it is in fact true to other people who don't share your preconceptions. How do you get there, and how do you show that you have? This is a problem for the religious. They desperately want to be there. They desperately want to think that the things that they believe are actually so, but how do they get to that justification? Because I don't think they can do it.
I believe I have justification that Christianity is true, and I believe it.
But that doesn't mean that it's actually true. See, here's where he's going wrong. Just because he believes that he has justification, that doesn't mean that he has justification. Your faith doesn't mean anything. Every religion that has ever existed, every believer that has ever lived, they have all said the exact same thing. They believe that they are justified in believing what they believe. But that doesn't mean that it's real. Faith in and of itself gets you absolutely nowhere. Otherwise, every single religion would have to be correct. Every cockamamie claim out there would have to be true because all of their adherents think that they're right. But it doesn't work that way in reality. That's why you need external validation, not just what's going on in your head. That's why you have to be able to demonstrate your evidence to validate your claims. You have to have that evidence to prove that what you assert is true is actually true. Got any? I didn't think so.
Therefore, I would say that I have knowledge.
But you don't. You have belief. You have faith. You have bullshit in your head that makes you cling to an emotionally comforting idea. That is not knowledge. Remember, knowledge requires that it be something applicable to all mankind. Not that you just think that all mankind ought to believe it, but that all mankind ought to be able to find said knowledge independently of your faith through some justifiable, verifiable means. Because guess what? Once upon a time, most people thought the earth was flat. I mean, some idiots still do, and they're just demonstrably wrong. The reason that those people still cling to that belief near universally is the same reason that Sean clings to his. They read the Bible. The Bible says quite clearly that the earth is flat, therefore the earth is flat. Except it isn't. Sean reads the Bible says that Jesus rose from the dead or whatever, I mean it doesn't really matter, and Sean believes it blindly. They're both wrong for exactly the same reasons. They believe nonsense in a book of mythology without any way to back it up in reality. Sean, stop doing that.
Now, how can I say that I know it? Well, in two ways. Number one, experientially.
But you have no demonstrable experience that you can point to. The best that you can do is to assert that you had an experience and then tell us what interpretation said experience had. That doesn't mean that's actually what happened. That's where the justification part comes in. You have to be able to justify that the experience happened and then that it happened as you assert that it did. If you say that God spoke to you, you have to be able to prove that in some way that those who didn't have your experience can validate it for themselves. And it's too bad you can't do that. So long as you can't do that, though, your claim is just that, a claim. Now, there's nothing wrong with having claims or making claims, but those claims are not knowledge, which is what he's claiming here. Those claims are just that. They're claims. They're things that you think are true. But that doesn't mean that they're true. Nobody has any good reason to believe you, and that's what you need to provide.
I do really believe that the Holy Spirit can directly speak to somebody's heart.
Please back that up with more than your say-so. Just because you really want it to be true, that doesn't mean that it is. Now, we can go back and forth on this forever, and for anybody who's ever tried to bring one of these crazy theists back down to earth, you know how well that's going to turn out. These people don't care if what they believe is true. They believe it, therefore, gotta be true. But that's not how truth actually works. It just makes them happy, and for them, that's all that matters. But they also, I think, they also recognize that people on the outside, if they're going to convince them, they have to present it as more than this crazy thing that's going on in their head. That's why they say it's knowledge. It's not knowledge. It's demonstrably not knowledge, but as long as they can couch it in those terms, well, it sounds a whole lot better than this crazy shit that I happen to believe. That doesn't make what they believe rational or justifiable or intelligent. It's why they're so absurdly dumb.
Second, I look at the evidence. I think the evidence that God exists, from the cosmological argument, the beginning of the universe, fine-tuning, existence of consciousness, morality, beauty, evidence from prophecy for the scriptures, etc., the resurrection.
Too bad none of that stands up to any kind of critical scrutiny, huh? That's the problem. This is all just interpretation. If I say that I saw lights in the sky and therefore I am justified in believing that there are aliens invading the planet, I would be out of my ever-loving mind. It's not a valid corroboration of said position. That's exactly what Sean is doing here, though. Our particular instantiation of space-time, yeah, it had a beginning as far as we can tell, therefore God. Why? Because he said so. Because it says so in the Bible. Because he believes it in his heart. How is that any different than, well, I saw a light in the sky, therefore aliens? Or, I read in a book that people got molested by little green men. How is that any different? If you're not going to buy into one, why should you buy into the other? Because you like it? That doesn't mean anything. Neither of them are at all rationally justifiable. Sean is an idiot.
I think the evidence also shows that Christianity is true.
Then you're wrong. Let's look at what you have. 2,000 years ago, a bunch of anonymous non-eyewitnesses wrote a bunch of stories that had been drifting around as verbal tales for decades. People who were predisposed to believe, well, just about anything, and now here Sean is buying into it hook, line, and sinker because it gives him an emotional Woody. Yes, that's stupid. It is just as stupid as it sounds. Yes, the universe that we inhabit, it did have a beginning of sorts. That doesn't mean that any God done it. You don't just get to pluck that out of your asshole because it sounds good to you. You have to fill in a lot more of the steps with demonstrable evidence before you can ever hope to get anywhere close. Philosophical arguments don't prove anything, especially when it comes to the real world. You cannot philosophize your way into any actual knowledge about some unknown species of wombat. You get that through science, not philosophy. All of this is just stupid. Yet he wants Christianity to be true, so voila, it's true, I guess. Except that's not knowledge, that's faith. They are two entirely different things. If you have knowledge, you don't need faith. If Christians had knowledge, faith would be the furthest thing from their mind. Too bad it isn't. It just proves what a bunch of lunatics they are.